Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through stacks of sources to pull out the key insights, giving you a shortcut to getting informed. Today, we're diving into a really powerful, maybe even provocative analysis. It suggests history has these recurring patterns, especially when it comes to republics collapsing. We're looking at excerpts from an article titled Napoleon, Caesar, Hitler, Trump, The End of Republics, sort of a lecture-style piece, analyzing how these charismatic myth-making leaders pop up in democracies and, well, according to the author, how they can actually lead to the downfall of those very republics.
Yeah, the central idea here is pretty fascinating, isn't it? It argues that it's not really rational policy, not logical debate that brings them power. It's more about perception management, narrative control. That's how these, well, myth makers rise up and change or even, dismantle democratic systems.
That's quite a claim. It definitely pushes back on how we often think power works. Okay, let's unpack this, see what we can learn about these forces that have shaped history and maybe, just maybe, are shaping things right now. So the article kicks off with a really interesting contrast, taking us back to the French Revolution. It paints Robespierre as this figure of, well, virtue and reason. Says he worked these crazy 18-hour days, unpaid, no luxury, just totally dedicated to the revolution's ideals. He really believed logic and reason can persuade everyone, guide society.
But what's clear, and this is maybe his fatal flaw, he just really overestimated how committed other people were to virtue. And he totally underestimated the power of, political self-interest. That's what brought him down in the end. A bit of a classic cautionary tale, really. Idealism hitting hard reality.
So a man driven by pure ideals, by logic, he falls because, well, people just aren't as rational or maybe as virtuous as he hoped. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? But then the story takes a sharp turn. Napoleon enters the scene. How does he contrast so starkly with Robespierre?
Well, Napoleon climbed the ladder through pure political skill, maneuvering, opportunism, really. He found and used political patrons early on, took part in a coup, and then, bam, quickly betrayed his allies to grab power for himself. His real genius, the article argues, wasn't just military stuff. It was his knack for myth-making, crafting this image.
But like a messiah figure?
Exactly, a savior, someone destined to bring order, glory. This story, this powerful narrative, it made people willing to literally die for him, for his vision.
And the result of all that myth-making?
He dismantled the French Republic, made himself emperor, so you have this stark contrast.
Robespierre trying to save it with virtue and Napoleon destroying it with myth. Wow. Okay, so the article doesn't stop there. It then makes some bold moves drawing parallels between Napoleon and, well, Julius Caesar, Adolf Hitler, and even Donald Trump. It's suggesting this isn't just a one-off thing. It's a pattern, right? In how republics maybe decay.
Right. And if you look at the bigger picture, Caesar, well, he also rose by working with patrons, cultivating this myth of himself as an unbeatable general, sort of above the messy politics, and ultimately that led to the end of the Roman Republic. It's a strikingly similar playbook, actually.
And Hitler. Obviously a different time, different context, Germany in the 20th century. How does he fit this pattern the article is laying out?
Hitler, too, kind of exploited existing currents. The Nazi movement was initially fostered by the German army to counter communists, but then he systematically sidelined allies, consolidated power, and crucially, built his own messianic image, the indispensable leader.
The one who could rescue Germany.
Precisely. Rescue it from the humiliation after World War I. That narrative, that myth, was powerful enough to let him tear down the Weimar Republic, Germany's democracy.
Okay, this pattern is definitely taking shape. It's quite compelling, actually. Which brings us to the modern day. And the article, including Donald Trump, in this lineup. Now, the article makes a really strong claim here, maybe provocative for some. Trump's genius is not policy. That kind of cuts against how we often evaluate leaders, doesn't it? What's the author really getting at there?
Yeah, that's a really key point they hammer home. If his success isn't based on knowing the policy details, then what is it based on? The argument is, look, maybe he doesn't fully grasp economics or trade or governance details, and this is the kicker, he doesn't need to, not for his kind of political power anyway.
That's interesting. So if it's not policy expertise, where does this genius lie? According to the piece, it suggests he spends his energy crafting a media persona, constantly talking to the press, feeding this ongoing story where he's the hero. The article even says it's almost like creating a religion.
Exactly right. Make America great again stops being just a slogan. It becomes, well, a kind of mythic belief system, a core tenet for his base. And the article points to something deep in human nature. People often don't just want dry facts. They crave stories. They want dreams, symbols. Trump, in this view, plays the main character in this big ongoing TV drama. And, a lot of Americans are hooked on that narrative.
That's a striking comparison. It really makes you ask, why? Why are people, generally speaking, so drawn to these kinds of myths? What's the psychology at play?
Well, the article touches on how we perceive things. We don't always judge quality objectively, do we? We compare. We use symbols, shortcuts. It gives that great wine example. You get 2 bottles, told one's pricier. You'll probably think it tastes better, even if it's the exact same wine.
Right. That wine example really drives it home. Perception coloring reality.
Yeah.
So how does that translate to politics, this myth of greatness idea, when maybe the country isn't actually doing better by objective measures?
Precisely. The article sort of applies that to economics, saying, okay, even if America gets objectively poorer, if, say, China looks like it's doing even worse, people can still feel like they're winning. The goal isn't necessarily making America truly wealthy in objective terms. It's about making it seem better off, stronger than everyone else. That's the myth of greatness, not necessarily the reality of prosperity.
So this suggests figures like Trump, viewed through this lens, aren't just politicians in the traditional sense. There's something else, something maybe more fundamental.
Yeah, what's really interesting is how the article frames them, almost like storytellers, prophets even, of national identity. And they succeed, it argues, because they tap into this deep human need for simple stories, clear heroes, an ordered world, even if that order is, well, basically made up through the narrative.
Okay, so what are the implications then for democracies like ours, supposedly built on reason, debate, evidence, policy? Does this suggest a kind of built-in vulnerability?
I think that's the crucial question it raises about fragility. It suggests democracies aren't just vulnerable to, say, economic shocks or outside threats. They're also deeply vulnerable to charismatic figures who offer emotional certainty, especially when times feel uncertain or complex. And often that certainty comes at the cost of rational discussion, of facts.
The article really leaves you with this sense that we might be living through another one of those historical turning points.
Yeah.
The potential decline of the American Republic, maybe, with Trump as a central figure in that story.
And if this kind of myth-driven politics keeps dominating the culture, the political landscape, and if democratic institutions keep getting worn down by it, then the article implies that historical pattern it laid out, well, in its view, it will be complete. You had Robespierre, virtue, trying to save the Republic. Then Napoleon, Caesar, Hitler, and potentially Trump, myth destroying it.
That's definitely a provocative thought to end on, isn't it? Something to really chew on. As you go about your day, maybe think about how much narratives and symbols, not just the facts and figures, shape your own view of leaders and, well, the future of democratic institutions. What stories are you buying into? And maybe, why?